I'll let Billy kick it off.
Sure. So hi and welcome everyone. I'm Billy Leigh. I lead the finance transformation practice at Embark. We're a national consulting firm of about 300 consultants who mainly focus on finance and accounting. So about 95% of our firm is former Big Four CPAs like Hayden, McHan here. In addition to being focused on finance and accounting, we really help or focus on, especially in the finance transformation practice, helping organizations go from data to decisions. So the speed at which you can turn data into decisions or to answer questions or overcome challenges is the speed at which businesses move. Hayden is going to walk you through how we did just that at HelloFresh. So we want to talk about automating the FP&A function. And then, of course, we have a senior sales engineer with Alteryx, Rishi Kapoor here. So Hayden and Rishi, why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Sure. Like Billy said, my name is Hayden McHan. I am a former Big Four auditor who left the Big Four group to join Embark to really help people like y'all automate your day-to-day life using softwares like Alteryx, Tableau, Power BI, anything in that realm. So really excited to be here with y'all, and Rishi, I'll kick it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Billy and Hayden. Hey, everyone. I'm Rishi. I'm a sales engineer here at Alteryx, coming in live from the London office. So it's a real privilege to be on this webinar today. I've been at Alteryx for over 3.5 years. I'm an ex-Alteryx user. My specialism is the vertical of like financial services, insurance. I work with customers and prospects like yourselves on the webinar today to help you automate your manual processes within FP&A. And I work very closely with the likes of Embark to actually help you get along your journey for digital transformation and automation. So it's great to be on here today. Really looking forward to it.
Awesome. A few housekeeping items for everyone before we dive into the details of everything. This webinar is CPE eligible, which is great for all of those CPAs out there. To get your CPE credits, you must answer 3 of the 4 polling questions and listen in for 50 minutes. Those polling questions will pop up throughout the webinar, and we'll make sure to be audible in saying when those are going to pop up. So make sure to answer that. There is a CPE course evaluation QR code at the end. We love y'all's feedback on how we can make these webinars better, make them engaging for everyone involved. The CPE certificates will be sent out next week so that you can get those submitted to your respective states. And there is a PDF of the slides that we'll be going through in the chat, and feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A box of Zoom. We'll answer those at the end of the webinar unless it is really important for us to address it in the moment. And in that case, we will. So without any further ado, let's dive into the details of our discussion on how you can automate your FP&A practice or process. Few learning objectives on what we're going to cover in our webinar today. First, we're going to start off by talking about the current state of FP&A and the challenges that many companies are facing in this space. Moving in to what the ideal future state of FP&A looks like and how that differs from what the current state is. And then to follow up with that, we're going to explain the journey on how you go from current state to future state, how you get started with the automation process. And we're going to show that through in a case study on how we did this with HelloFresh and the automation strategy that they enabled. And then we'll specifically talk about one of the workflows that we made for them that really made a big impact and was the first splash for them. So that's the learning objectives that we're going to cover, and I'm going to hand it off and we'll dive into what the current state looks like.
Thanks, Hayden. So let's talk about the current state of finance, FP&A, and I'm going to be talking to you around my experiences and how we can get you to the most ideal future state. Now, we can see some numbers on the screen here, and they were fairly shocking to me at first look. Based on my experience, more than 90% or even 95% of the tasks that we have to go through on a day-to-day basis in finance, they're up for automation. You may be, a finance analyst, or you have experience with FP&A or working within that vertical. And what I found is that those sort of specialists have a lot of manual processes which they can automate. As a result of this, we tend to spend more than 50% of our time actually finding the right data. So we've heard of, the terms golden source of data, single version of the truth, but the starting point and the challenge is actually where do you look to go and get your data? What sort of data sources do you need for your daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly reports? That takes a lot of time. So, when we talk about digital transformational processes and activities in finance, that can really help reduce that time. Now, I'm not going to talk about what's been happening in the world for the last 2 years, but with COVID and the global pandemic, our ways of working has changed. And what I found that at least 30% of FP&A professionals are spending more time investigating new technologies, new processes, new platforms, getting an understanding of how they can actually use analytics with their data and their processes. Now, with all of this going on, at least 65% of individuals have said that they face reporting delays. I work with individuals, or we work with individuals within finance departments in companies like HelloFresh. And it's all about, keeping that business as usual going can take a lot of time every day. But if we go to the next slide, please, Hayden, we can actually talk about how digital transformation can help you save that time. So what we can see here is that ideal future state of FP&A. Now, if we were sitting in a room today and I would ask a question, if I can save 65% of your time, would you be happy or not? I think most of you will put your hands up and be very, very happy at that prospect. As a result of this, we can see a few key areas here what that ideal future state can look like. And one of them is definitely we want to close faster. So what I found is we want to get rid of those mundane manual tasks, and we want to transform our financial or our finance activities. We want to hit those reporting deadlines as opposed to getting fined, or, reporting after the event as opposed to reporting real time or at the event, or even doing some advanced stuff like forecasting what's going to happen in the future. It's all about saving money. Now, again, if I ask you this question, how many of you in your department are constantly being told about cost-cutting exercises, budgeting, OPEX numbers? The list is endless. We all want to save money, even in this new way of working, and we want to reduce our operational costs. Once we're actually on this journey to get to that ideal state of FP&A, we really want to produce reports that are trustworthy. Your senior managers want to ask you questions. You want to give those answers which are correct, open, and they want to trust those answers to be able to make those decisions for the business you're working for. Individuals want to be more analytical. They want to reduce time on those operational tasks and spend more time doing something more interesting, advanced, help your company make some money and be beneficial from a business point of view. And lastly, we talk about savings. Well, we want to make intercompany savings as well. So it's not only about savings externally as a company, we want to make cross-departmental savings. So there's a few factors here in terms of what can play, in terms of what the ideal state of FP&A looks like. And, what we're going to talk about today is definitely going to be some very clear examples on the impact of digital transformation. Now, I believe, Hayden, we have our first question of the day.
That we do. And so it's going to talk, the question is based on what Rishi just talked about. And the question is, what percent of finance teams experience delays in the FP&A process? Is it A, 18%, B, 33%, C, 45%, D, 65%, or E, 87%? Give y'all a few minutes or a minute or so to answer this question. Just a reminder, for those that are CPAs and need credits, you have to answer 3 of the 4 questions that we will ask to get those CPE credits. Got a little over 80%. Fun getting to watch all these responses come in and see y'all's engagement. Give it just a few more seconds for those last few people to get their responses in, and then we will pop up the results and recap them. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and share the results with y'all. So the correct answer was D, 65%, and about half of everyone got it right. So just a reminder from what Rishi had said is that they've seen that about 65% of people experience reporting delays in the FP&A process. And if y'all have any questions about what Rishi talked about, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll make sure to cover those at the end of the webinar. Now I'm gonna keep going back through and I'm gonna hand it over to Billy on how teams can get started with FP&A automation and Embark strategy around that.
Yeah, so when we think about automation or more globally, a digital transformation, it's important to begin with the end in mind. So to steal from the 7 habits, but more specifically, what is the question that you're trying to answer, the challenge that you're trying to overcome, or the decision that you're trying to drive? When you have that information to begin with, you can then start to work backwards to get an understanding of where are we now? And then this transformation happens as you go from your current state to the future state. But again, really important to understand where you want to go, and just as important to understand what you're currently capable of. And as we start to develop that roadmap, we want to assess the immediate pain points, right? The end goal of an automation or a digital transformation it should be a long-term goal, and one that will continuously keep moving down the road as you continue to create and drive change, as you develop new ways of understanding how to solve problems. But assessing those immediate pain points and solving a lot of quick wins along the way to a larger scale automation project really helps us to see the value along the way, instead of only deriving value from a waterfall style project where you deliver some large, meaningful solution at the very end. We'll then want to come in and have, we understand where we want to go, we understand where we're coming from, and we've started to implement these quick wins. And from there, we want to develop really a center of excellence, right? So that looks like automating cost accounting, right? If you have a third-party consultancy come in and do that for you, it's nowhere near as valuable to always depend on that consultancy, if you will, to continue to drive that solution. Somewhere between your current state, right, where you are, and the talent or the skills or the solution you want to develop, having your team internally pick that solution up. So to understand what's possible, and then understand how it works, and then to understand how they can apply that solution to net new problems within your organization, drives organization-wide change, because then internally you have this center of excellence who understands what's possible and how you can use tools like Alteryx to drive large-scale automation changes. And even if the rest of the organization doesn't know how Alteryx works, they don't know how to build a car, they do know how to drive a car or what it's capable of. And so that helps to feed from the organization's viewpoint, problems back to your center of excellence or your group of power users who understand what these tools are capable of and how to manipulate them to achieve your end goal. And that center of excellence feeds problems back to the organization. So initially, you'll have someone come in and feed you, but then eventually you teach people in your organization how to fish, and then they end up feeding the rest of the organization. Oh, this would have been helpful. Sorry, I'm talking over the wrong slide, but this piece in the middle is this roadmap. And that's, developing quick wins, creating a center of excellence, and then achieving widespread adoption. That becomes the backbone of what should be a digital strategy for how the entire organization uses people, process, technology, or your data to solve problems, and then the infrastructure that supports that. And this isn't necessarily a finance function or necessarily an IT function or necessarily an operations function. It's breaking down those silos and having them all work together for a unified digital strategy so that we're not just solving the problem immediately in front of us. We're not losing the forest through the trees. We understand when there's a problem, we should understand where we want to go. We should understand where we are and how to work together to get there and how these solutions will apply globally to the rest of the organization.
Awesome. Thanks, Billy. Anything else on that other slide you want me to go back for you to cover?
No, we're good.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, with that, and thinking about what Billy just talked about, we're going to jump into our second polling question, which is what software do you use for your FP&A process? Do you use A, Excel, B, Alteryx, C, a dedicated FP&A software, D, what is FP&A, or E, a combination of Excel, Alteryx, and a dedicated software, or any of the combination of those three? We'll give everyone a few minute or so to answer that. Give everyone a few more seconds just based on how many people responded to the last one. I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to input their answer. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll in 3, 2, 1, and let's look at the results. So, not surprising at all, but the majority of people are using Excel or a combination of Excel and Alteryx and an FP&A software to do their FP&A process, which is pretty normal from what I saw in the Big Four world and what I'm seeing now at Embark. And we all know the struggles that Excel can bring. Only 5% of people are using Alteryx, which I hope after this, y'all will see the value that Alteryx provides and how it can really make your life exciting and a little bit easier. So with all of that, we're now going to jump into our HelloFresh FP&A use case, and I'm going to walk through everything from start to end that we did with them, and it will cover the pain points that Rishi talked about. It walks through the cycle that Billy just explained and how we went from their current state, or what was their current state, to what is now their ideal state in process, and how that's changed the process and improved people's lives. So starting off with the main problem that they had, why they looked at Embark and Alteryx to help them through their FP&A process. And there were a myriad of problems that they were facing, but it boiled down to a few key points. One, they were short-staffed, not enough people to do all the work that it required. Everyone knows that struggle. Second, there's many data sources that were large, cumbersome, hard to use, whether it was data warehouse queries or Excel files that wanted to crash your computer every time you open them. Just things that sometimes are out of an individual's control and being able to deal with. Next, it's the continual refreshes for daily validation of this data. These large data sources often needed to be refreshed throughout the week in order to capture the most up-to-date, most relevant data. And so having to refresh an Excel sheet that crashes your computer every week is never fun. So all of those three things led to the preparation of the data taking precedence over the analysis. People didn't have time to prepare and analyze their data. The entire timeline was spent prepping it for the meeting rather than being able to answer the questions during the meeting. And so that always led to last minute changes needing to be made to the data, just exacerbating that problem and making it more difficult to really understand what's going on, eventually leading to the continual race to finish getting the data ready on time. So if anyone has a work experience like mine, not necessarily in the FP&A world, but from just a working world in general, I've experienced this exact same problem in my life. And so what this looks like from a logistical standpoint is people would get the data on a Tuesday. They have to create the file, find the issues in that file, and then compile all the data together, be able to present that to a meeting on Wednesday morning, often getting new data right before the meeting on Wednesday, which required a refresh so that you're presenting the most recent and relevant data. From the meeting on Wednesday, you have conversations about why does this data look like this? Why doesn't this add up here? And every rabbit hole that you can go down in a meeting like that. After the meeting, you dive into these issues, trying to identify all of the problems that you can. Get new data. Again, this is the third time we're getting data. And then hopefully get all of those loose ends tied up by Thursday afternoon so you can push this to Tableau for a Thursday afternoon meeting. And so between Tuesday and Thursday, people were getting 3 different updates of data and having to do this whole manual process every single time. And there's often room for human error in that. You filter for the wrong thing, you fill over a cell, all of these different things that can create issues in that problem, leading to reporting delays, leading to no time for analysis. So that was the setting and why HelloFresh engaged Embark and Alteryx to help solve this problem and really expand the ways that they can use technology in their FP&A process. So given that problem, what does a solution look like, and how does a solution make someone's life in the FP&A team better? How does it improve the timeliness of the data? How does it improve the accuracy of the data? How does it get buy-in from your stakeholders that, hey, spending the time and money on automating this process is really going to be worth it? And so that's what I want to talk about next, and how this solution came about, how we were able to work with HelloFresh and Alteryx to make this process better. So like every automation solution, you have to get buy-in from your stakeholders. You have to get people to sign off on spending the time and money and the resources to change something from Excel to Alteryx or Tableau, or name the software. So to do that, we put together a demo of Alteryx's capabilities through really easy to understand workflows, showing how Alteryx can take data set A and turn it into data set A+, where it's a really clean data set that takes care of all of the Excel functions that you would often do, maybe splitting out some columns, renaming stuff, cleaning up the amounts, blending data sources together, adding in new analysis into this data, all of which you would have to do every time you get a new data set. You would have to create this column. You would have to filter out these rows that are irrelevant data. So by doing the demo for these stakeholders, we got their buy-in and we got them to see, hey, if Alteryx can do this with this really small data set really quickly, think about all of the different ways that it could help us in our FP&A process, which is always on the time crunch. So once we have buy-in from those people, we're able to start working with the users of the FP&A process to really understand what they do. From I open this Excel file, I apply filters, I create columns. We walk through every single step of that process to replicate it in Alteryx, to create and blend all of the data together so that they can have the analysis, have the data, have the fields that they need, and really focus on the analysis piece of that. But once we built the Alteryx workflow, we incorporated all of the different variables that could come in on a weekly basis. We accounted for all of those unknowns and really made a rigid process of it so that you don't have to worry about human error. You don't have to worry about things getting left out of your filters. We take the data from Alteryx and we push it to a data warehouse. And the benefit of using a data warehouse is that you can store significantly more data in a data warehouse than you can in than you can in Excel. We all know Excel has that million-ish records limit, and even if you're under 1 million, trying to use it to visualize or show data, if you have 500,000 rows, can be really difficult. So by using the data warehouse, we're able to store and recall a lot more data than you could in Excel. And finally, using the Alteryx data that we created and using the data warehouse, we're able to present the data in Tableau, which allows for greater analysis than we had in Excel. So the combination of clean data through Alteryx with a really visually appeasing and pleasing Tableau dashboard led to greater analysis for the FP&A team and has saved a significant amount of time and really opened up the doors for what is possible for the FP&A team, what they're able to do with this extra time and analysis that they have. So before I get any deeper, we're going to take a second and go to our third CPE polling question. And that question is, what is the biggest obstacle that you personally have faced to FP&A automation? Is it A, time, B, cost, C, a lack of knowledge about what is out there from an automation standpoint, or D, you are already using automation? Everyone a minute or so to answer that. Or if it's a combination of the two, feel free to drop those in the chat. It's always interesting to see what people are facing. As oftentimes it is a combination of maybe time and cost, or you're already using it, but you still can't use it to the extent that you would like. People, a few more seconds. I want to make sure CPAs out there get their CPE credits. I know my deadline came up last month and I was like, oh, I need to go get some more credits. All right, I'll give everyone about 5 seconds to get your last responses in. All right, and let's look at these results. So the two biggest ones were lack of time and a lack of knowledge of the options that are out there. And those are both very valid issues that people face. And it's very normal to face those. So hopefully through this webinar, you'll see that sometimes the time commitment that people think about from an automation standpoint isn't as big to get started as some people think. It can often be let's do something really small and get started, and it's going to start a snowball effect, which I'm going to get into here in a second. And one thing that I just saw come up in the chat that I want to make sure to note on is compatibility with current systems. And that definitely can be a challenge for teams as well. And one benefit of Alteryx is that I would be willing to bet that almost everyone has Excel for their FP&A process, and Alteryx and Excel are definitely compatible. So hopefully maybe this discussion can alleviate some of those concerns around that one. So with that, I'm going to show y'all, oops, one slide too far. Just a high level example of what the HelloFresh workflow looked like. I don't want to go too far into the details with showing all the tools and whatnot. But I think this is a great visual that really shows how we took 3 company Excel files, a Google Sheet file, and turned it into a very pretty, very visually appealing Tableau dashboard. We started off with just some general cleaning for each of these Excel files. We had to make it so that you can stack these Excel files together, combine all 4 companies into one data set, just general cleaning that you would do. Then we did some transformation in that data. We added in some extra fields. We did some mathematical calculations to make sure that we have all the information that we need to compare metrics that you'll use in FP&A. There's a variety of them. And Alteryx really makes those calculations a lot easier to understand what you're calculating and how you're calculating it. And it allows for an auditable trail of that, which I'm gonna speak to that in a second, because that's a huge benefit of using Alteryx. Then we blend all of that data together. We stack all 4 companies together so that you have got one data set for every week that you're looking at, rather than having to open up 4 Excel files or however many based on the data size. Blend those together, and then we output that to the data warehouse. And then the Tableau dashboard pulls directly from the data warehouse and refreshes on a regular basis. And you can also push manual refreshes if you have to run it outside of the normal schedule. So it really wasn't a complicated workflow at all. It might sound complicated, but it was really one of the more fun workflows to build and to see how the users of it saw how simple it was to really build this workflow. So the solution that we talked about falls into a category of solutions that I like to call a quick win. The Alteryx workflow took about 30 minutes. It took 30 minutes of manual data blending, cleaning for the FP&A team across 4 brands, and automated it so that now this 30-minute process runs in about a minute. Now people have the ability to change the data at the last minute. If the meeting starts at noon and it's 11:55 and someone says, hey, I just updated this Excel file, can you go update all the data? You got 5 minutes. You could run it 5 times in that process, which is a really big thing for this team, because that data got updated constantly, because you wanted to have the most relevant data for the meetings. Also reduced the likelihood of errors. Automating something in its nature takes out the human error aspect of things. And so all of that, automating that process took about an hour saving 2 hours of time every week for this team. They're able to use that 2 hours to analyze the data. They're able to come into the meeting with analysis prepped, which has been huge. And this was the first thing that we did with the team. So like I said a second ago, this is what falls into a category that I like to call a quick win, because it was so fast to build and it's saving double the time that it took to build on a weekly basis. So over a month, you're saving 8 hours, and you can extrapolate that out to a full year. But within solution building, I like to bucket things into 4 main types of groups. Our quick wins, which is what we have here, are low impact items, but they're really quick to build. Are big projects that have huge impacts for the organization, but they take some time. And then what I like to call our never do's. Those are the low impact solutions that take a long time. So by focusing on these quick wins, these high impact, quick to build solutions, you're able to really get people's buy-in again. I'm going to keep going back to that point because buy-in is important to get stakeholders and other users on board. You really show people the art of what's possible, and you open Pandora's box for what they can do with it. And once you've tackled those quick wins, you can really jump into some of these other projects, your big projects that have massive impacts for the organization, but they'll take a little bit more time to build out because by their nature, they're more complicated processes. And some of those other items that have a lower impact, but they're still relatively quick and easy to build. So those are the three main areas that we like to focus on. And then you never really want to do anything that doesn't have a big impact for the organization and takes a really long time to do. You don't see a great ROI in those cases. So let's talk about the impact. What did this mean for HelloFresh? How did it change the way they plan? How did it change the day-to-day life of the analysts who were preparing this and the leaders who were reviewing the data? So one of the biggest things that this solution enabled the team to do is it allows for business growth. HelloFresh is a growing organization, and with growth comes new challenges with your FP&A processes. Many of you might know. You're adding in locations, you're adding in product offerings, you're adding in whatever it is. And that can sometimes break your Excel file. Your VLOOKUP doesn't account for this new product offering that you have or this new location that you have. Your formula doesn't account for that. And Alteryx, unlike Excel, is really good at handling new data like that without having to go through it and find that exact function in your formula where it is. It's a simple add to the Alteryx workflow. And I've seen how Alteryx has allowed this growth, not only in the FP&A group, but throughout HelloFresh because of this growth that they're experiencing. And so rather than being behind a week because you've got to figure out how to enable a new location in your Excel file, it wasn't a whole lot of work in Alteryx to account for that. The second biggest impact is an audit trail. Coming out of the Big Four accounting world, audit trails are super important because as a former auditor, I wanted to be able to understand how did you go from this number here to this number all the way down on the other end of the Excel file. And sometimes in Excel, you don't really see that. You can lose the filtering. It can be hard to trace a really complicated formula. But Alteryx allows for a point-by-point results view of what is happening step by step in the workflow. You see your data before the transformation takes place, and you see the transformation, you see the data after the transformation takes place, which is huge. You no longer have to worry about, did I filter this right? Is everything that I want getting captured in my filter? You can go look at the true side of your filter and see, hey, everything that is here is supposed to be here. And then conversely, you look at the false side of the filter and make sure, is anything not in here that should be in here, or is anything in here that shouldn't be in here, to make sure that your filter accounts for all the nuances of your data. And you also can then go back in time and see, this output doesn't look quite right. Where is this row or group of rows getting dropped out in my data? Did my formula work right? Is 1 + 1 = 2, or is there something weird going on in my data? And that's a huge increase in value for teams to be able to see at each step in the process, how is my data changing? Next, it's creating time for analysis. And I've discussed this kind of throughout the use case, but now with this extra time that these analysts have, they're able to go and dig into, why is this number high or low? Why don't these two numbers align when they really should? And they're able to go into these meetings throughout the week ready to discuss issues that have already been identified, rather than having to start from zero, then identify the issues and discuss them. They have a launch point already. They're skipping the things that senior leaders and executives don't necessarily want to spend their time doing. They want to be like, hey, what's the problem? How can I help you solve it? And what do we need to do to understand these problems better? All of these points that I've just talked about really go to speak to how automation, Alteryx, Tableau, can improve the team morale. For me personally, I'm not a huge fan of spending my days doing the same formula over and over in Excel, waiting for Excel to start responding after it stopped responding, or for Excel to crash after I spend an hour doing all of this data cleansing and having to start over again. But now that people don't have to do that process in Excel, people tend to like their jobs better. They get to enjoy doing the things that they went to school to do, to analyze this data, to understand, what is the data telling me? What business decisions should we make or shouldn't we make based on what we're understanding? And not only from being able to spend time doing things that people like, it adds a new skill to their tool belt. It adds to the professional development, which can create opportunities for these people to grow personally, professionally, and creates new opportunities for them and how they can benefit your organization and really help drive better understanding of data and better decision making from that. And finally, all of that can lead to further adoption of automation and Alteryx throughout your organization as a whole. It takes one person to start this effect within an organization. It takes one person saving themselves 2 hours a week for other people to catch on and be like, hey, that person's a little bit happier. They're not working 50 hours a week because Excel keeps crashing. They're going home earlier. They're getting to spend time with their family and their kids, or they're getting to go do things at work that they really want to do. They're able to create new dashboards. They're able to take on new responsibilities because of this extra time that they have. And so that can lead to people buying into, hey, Alteryx can really change the way that I do my job. It can enable me to do other things throughout my day, which has been really impactful, not only for me personally, but for the clients that I've worked with so far, and for the other people that I've talked with at Embark who have done the same thing for other clients, and talking with Alteryx sales reps and Alteryx sales engineers about how they've done that for others as well. And so that, in a very brief nutshell, is the FP&A use case that we wanted to share with y'all about the work that we've done with HelloFresh and the way it's revolutionized their FP&A process. And from putting this all together, I know that they've continued to grow their Alteryx workflows, their Tableau dashboards, and how they use these concepts that we've talked about to really revolutionize the process. Because everything that we've discussed, it isn't just for HelloFresh or just for Embark or just for Alteryx. It's for everyone. These are concepts that anyone can apply to their business, large or small, and really start to change the way your organization looks at data, looks at FP&A, and looks at automation. And so let's jump into our last FP&A question. Then I want to open up the floor, or not last FP&A question, our last CPE question, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. But our last question that we want to focus on is, what is your biggest FP&A complaint? Is it Excel crashing, last minute data changes, data prep is time consuming, or D, our process is perfect? Again, realizing from the chat that I should have added a combination of A, B, C, or D to this one, because it often is a combination of one. So pick your favorite answer out of all of these. And while people are answering that, Rishi or Billy, if there's anything that y'all want to address from the chat, go ahead and get those queued up and we can talk about that. And if other people on here have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat or the Q&A panel, and we can address those. We've got the time to do so, and hearing from y'all and hearing what's on your mind is often where people get the most excited about it. And I would be willing to bet a good chunk that if you've got a question, there's someone else that has it, so don't be afraid to ask. So I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, 1 and share the results. And it looks like, no surprisingly, the biggest FP&A complaint by far is data prep is time consuming. And that is so true. And so I hope that through my discussion and Rishi's discussion that you can see how Alteryx can help take some of the pain out of that data prep and make it more exciting and more fun. So with that, let's dive into some Q&A. One question that I see in here is, are we going to demo Alteryx? We are not going to be doing an actual Alteryx demo today. We wanted to keep this high level without getting too far in the weeds. We didn't want to scare anyone off by showing them an Alteryx workflow, but it seems like people want a demo, so we can make that happen, I would assume.
If someone on the call is interested in the demo, our contact information is available to the invite, or you can reach us on LinkedIn, and we're more than happy to sit down, walk through an Alteryx demo, talk about what type of problems you're seeing in your organization and how you can merge the power of FP&A or double entry bookkeeping in conjunction with data sources in Alteryx to help drive a real change inside your organization. It only takes one person with an Alteryx license to really spark a revolution, if you will.
Just want to add to that. I think demoing specifically to you or your team will be more beneficial to you, so that we can show you features and functions that are going to be specific to your processes. So for example, there's somebody mentioned connecting to QuickBooks. We can, collectively customize the demo to what you want to see. I see that we've got the HelloFresh workflow on the screen as well. So this gives you an idea of what an Alteryx workflow looks like.
I want to echo what Rishi just said about doing a demo with your data and your process. We've seen is more beneficial a lot of times for people to really understand it when you can see how your data moves through it. We're going to paste in the one of the profiles for one of our Embark reps that handles finance transformation in the chat. Billy, your posts were going to just the panelists. So I'm going to paste all in there for everyone.
We had a good question in the Q&A box, actually, guys. I get this question quite a lot around how long does it take to actually start building out Alteryx workflows? In my experience, I would say I've worked with customers where it's taken less than 5 hours, but normally they're building production-ready workflows within 5 to 7 hours, I would have thought. If we're all working together to help you out, then it can probably even be less than 5 hours.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I've seen the same happen for people.
So Brian Holtz asked, when he thinks of consulting, he doesn't think of quick wins. How would you show a customer a quick win without selling us licenses of Alteryx, et cetera? I think something that we do really well at Embark is take a use case that you have. So an Excel workbook that's taking you 40 hours a week or month to manually work through. We can very quickly, in a matter of hours, turn that into an Alteryx workflow that saves your company time and money. So think about, from this perspective, if you can save someone 10 minutes a day, every day of their work year, so 250 days, you get about 41.6 hours back. I'd say spending an hour to save 10 minutes a day or getting a week back of your work year is definitely a quick win. Another question we have from an anonymous attendee is, how does Alteryx differentiate itself from some of the other FP&A systems, Adaptive, Profix, Planful? I think the difference there is, and in my mind, you have 3 layers of technology when it comes to solving these problems. The first we're all familiar with, that's your spreadsheets, incredibly dynamic, but not very powerful when it comes to automation beyond single cell automation, and not very auditable because you're always working with the data in its end state. Once you started to manipulate it, there is no getting it back to its original state. The other or top layer is going to be your systems. So these are, they're purpose-built tools. So Adaptive, Profix, Planful, purpose-built FP&A tools. And again, they're very powerful. They're just not very dynamic. So you build out solutions over a period of time that sit in those solutions. Alteryx, in my mind, sits in this middle layer. So it's as dynamic as Excel, meaning it can hook up to literally almost any digital data source, and you're able to manipulate it very quickly to get outputs. You can solve any problem you're currently solving in Excel, you can solve with Alteryx. Whereas, and you can do it in a very short period of time because it's a tool-based system that sits on your computer, or very soon you'll be able to access from the cloud. Whereas Planful is, or an Adaptive and Profix are, those are systems that have to be set up and integrated and purpose built for the outputs you're getting there. Whereas Alteryx is just much more dynamic. The learning curve is much smaller, and you can manipulate the code behind the scenes much quicker. It's actually not code, it's just a drag and drop visualization. And Christopher Kent says, if I have data that we want to analyze outside of accounting data, how flexible is the software to customize it to work with databases like SQL? Rishi, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Alteryx is completely flexible and agnostic when it comes to connecting to SQL databases. We can connect natively to the likes of Oracle, Snowflake, SQL Server. You're even able to query. You can put in SQL queries within your Alteryx workflow. I personally, recommend and prefer to build out an end-to-end visual workflow. But yeah, we can definitely connect very easily. And the good thing about Alteryx is, when you're trying to access these databases, it will just use the same access and permissions that you already have anyway. So you don't have to go to IT and request any additional permissions, so to speak. Alteryx allows to actually connect via the method that you're already using to connect. So that could be just a driver or whatever sort of connection you're using at the moment. I know. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Billy.
You can work from multiple different disparate sources. So in the workflow Hayden is showing, it looks like they're connecting from multiple different files as well as a G sheet. You could add a cloud-based data source there, an on-prem SQL server, an FTP file pickup. There are a number of different ways you can connect all types of different data sources into a single Alteryx workflow to get a specific output. And then the last question in our Q&A is, can you show us an example? I would highly encourage you to go to the Alteryx website and look in the use case library. There are thousands and thousands of examples that you can custom build to your, or not custom build, that you can find to revolving around probably specific issues you're dealing with. Also, the Alteryx community, incredibly powerful and can help you answer questions around Alteryx as well as get a free trial. The software is very easy to learn. And it's why if you're in the Big Four, you're being forced to learn these. If you're at a major university, you're being taught these in class. I always like to say that we don't put our typing speed on our resumes anymore. The same way that I see fewer and fewer people putting Excel on their resume. We know you know Excel. What else do you know that can help you get the job done better, faster, stronger, so that you can do more critical thinking and less data manipulating?
To your point, Billy, we've got over 300,000 users on our community now on a daily basis. So that's pretty amazing. And something else, actually, Billy, you mentioned from our website, you can also download starter kits. So we have an Office of Finance starter kit. We've got FP&A starter kits. These get refreshed every quarter. And I've got customers who just changed their input data and they're using starter kit workflows as part of their production process. So they're very powerful. Even if you have got a sample workflow, reach out to the Embark team to work with you to customize that workflow and show you the value of how your manual processes can be automated.
All the Alteryx community is one of my most visited websites. It gives me statistics of how many times I go to it, and looking at that on a weekly or monthly level is quite comical, because it's just a great resource of just normal people that are trying to use Alteryx to solve problems. People on there aren't always high-level coders. It's normal people who can't figure one weird nuance about their data out and need another set of eyes. The QR code for the CPE course evaluation is up if you are so inclined to fill that out. We love people's feedback. We want to make these sessions better every single time. So feel free to take a second to do that. And then all of our contact info for Rishi, Billy, and myself is up on the slide, and there's our Embark email, our general one, in the chat as well. So feel free to reach out to any of us via email, LinkedIn. We want to engage with y'all. We want to help make your life better. So any other closing comments? The CPE course certificates will be sent out via email next week once we've been able to aggregate all of the data that goes into how they create those. So our team will be sending those out to you. And then how do you find out about future sessions? They're posted on Embark's website and Alteryx's website, as well as on our personal LinkedIn pages. So you can follow Embark, you can follow Alteryx, or connect with Rishi, Billy, and myself, and we post about these all the time. Billy, is there anywhere else that these are published? That our website and LinkedIn the biggest one? And emails will be going out to people about future webinars as well.
Perfect.
And I will drop into the chat some LinkedIn profiles as well for y'all. And I'll stick on for another minute or so if there's any people that want to have more questions.
Did you drop a link to the course eval?
To the what?
Drop a link to the course eval.
Yes, let me scan the QR code and do that. Awesome. Well, we really appreciate all of y'all joining us today. And again, I'll stay on for another minute or so if there's people with more questions. But thank y'all very much for spending an hour of your day with us.
Thank you all.
So the output, there, we had a question in the Q&A. Is the output and functionality of the software somewhat similar to what can be shown through Power Pivot and things like Power BI? So the back end of Power BI and Power Pivot, yes, except you don't have to learn DAX formulas. You're not learning a coding language, and you're able to do things like fork logic into multiple streams. So if you have a set of data for, say you're doing payroll and you have your fixed comp and you have your variable comp employees and you want to fork them and provide logic for one set of employees on one stream and another set, you can't really do that in Power Pivot and Power BI because you're always manipulating the entirety of the data set. So it's much more powerful, much more robust. And that's why, even though Power BI has been around for a long time, and we love Power BI for its visualizations, but the back end is just not as dynamic, and it's not as easy to learn. And when you force folks in specifically finance and accounting roles to start learning a coding language like DAX, it tends to decrease user adoption. And so in terms of adoption and self-service, Alteryx really kind of is head and shoulders above any of the other tools I've worked with. And then Hayden, were you able to post a link to the course eval?
Yes, it is in the chat now.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank y'all very much. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.